Monday, February 22nd, Board of Ed business meeting to order. I'd ask you all to please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And we will move on to our first item of business, which is our Board of Ed student representatives report. Giselle and Josh.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you're doing well. And I hope this was the last snowstorm, because I don't know about you guys. I'm pretty done with the snow at this point. Yeah.
I think so, yes.
All right. Just getting started. I have some good news from all of our elementary schools. So getting started at Willow Avenue Elementary. The character theme for February is responsibility. Students have done an amazing job of being responsible, not just in February, but throughout this school year. Students have begun their exploration of energy, and after their shocking discoveries relating to static electricity, they're eager to learn about electrical circuits before meandering into the world of magnets. Students have participated in a STEM activity where each student designed and made a Cupid's arrow and practiced shooting it at the Valentine's Day heart target. During the month of February, students are studying a unit called Fight for a Cause. They're learning about some courageous Americans who fought for human and civil rights for all. We are all looking forward to celebrating the 100th day of school on February 24th and 25th. Now over to Cornwall on Hudson. At Cornwall on Hudson, we have been focusing on the character trait responsibility during the month of February. Students have been taught that being responsible means you do the right things you are expected to do and accept the consequences for your actions. The Cornwall Cares Challenge this month was to say good morning to at least 10 people when arriving at school. The band and orchestra members continue to work hard and are honoring their skills and are honing their skills on their instruments. Coming in March, they will have the opportunity to show off their talents and take part in the virtual instrumental recital. The music department is super excited to put together this video collection of their young musicians, which is no easy task. So congratulations to them, and I hope that goes well. The student council at COH is in the process of planning a Zoom meeting with Mr. Dade, the superintendent of schools. The students are preparing questions that will help them get to know Mr. Dade, along with getting to know what it is to be like a superintendent. They're all excited to participate. On February 12th, Mrs. Baumel and Mrs. Kim visited numerous classrooms at COH to celebrate the Chinese New Year, the year of the ox. They read a short story about the new year and played a short video. Students were taught the numbers 1 through 10 in Chinese. To conclude, each child was given chopsticks and a red money envelope for good luck. The students really enjoyed the presentation. And I don't know my 1 through 10 in Chinese, so I'm impressed. And then finally, we have some good news from Cornwall Elementary School, Lee Road. This past month at CES has flown by as we have kept busy with Rock Your School Day, trips to Black Rock, and STEAM activities. We've also celebrated Chinese New Year and Black History Month. Our second graders really rocked out for Rock Your School Day. They spent the day doing activities that all centered around music. They did a close read of an article about Taylor Swift, answered questions about her life, and searched the article for suffixes because they have been working on them in class. They did pop rock writing, and the children came up with great adjectives to describe what the pop rock felt like in their mouths. The students also did an experiment with pop rocks inflating balloons over soda bottles and wrote about what makes them a rock star. Students in Mrs. Camacho's class rocked out during a Rock Your School Day as well. They completed rock and roll math problems, read about the history of rock and roll, and created a rock and roll stage that had to hold up 50 things. Students in Mrs. Noonan's class had a blast during Rock Your School Day. They studied the music of the Beatles and the Jackson 5. In addition, they rocked out with multi-step word problems and got charged up with electricity during science. It was a great day for all. Mrs. Aguilar's class had a lesson on the Chinese New Year from our ENL teachers, Mrs. Kim and Mrs. Baumel. Later, Mrs. Aguilar had the kids use the chopsticks to practice fine motor skills by picking up small cubes and using them to demonstrate part, whole. And again, I'm still working on that today, but that's all right. You know, our elementary schoolers and seniors have something in common. Mrs. Harder's class did a STEAM activity and learned all about civil engineers and the shapes that make the strongest bridges. They used toothpicks, marshmallows, fruit snacks, and cups to build the longest bridge they could. There were some obstacles the students had to overcome when building, but they did a great job demonstrating the skill of perseverance. Now, bear with me with this name. I believe it's Mrs. Redisquiz. I'm sorry. Kindergarten class had fun sorting and counting sweethearts and creating a graph of their hearts. They also had fun practicing tapping to read words with a Valentine roll and read game. We are looking forward to warming up in the next few weeks so that we may continue to bring our students outside to discover the changes in season and plan for more outdoor learning activities. And now on to Giselle for the middle school and high school.
Okay, Cornwall Central Middle School, good news. The middle school participated in the Great Kindness Challenge and No Name Calling Week. Throughout the week, 5th and 6th grade students recorded their acts of kindness. CCMS students completed 6,678 acts of kindness in 1 week. Students began their second season of clubs at CCMS. We are very excited that we are able to offer opportunities to our students to connect and explore new hobbies, activities, and interests. Modified winter sports have begun at CCMS. We had an amazing turnout, and we are excited to get our students back in the gym. And finally, February 2021 CCHS student report for the Cornwall Central High School. This month, many sports were able to officially compete with surrounding schools. Specifically, the track and field team had a meet last Saturday, and the girls won all the events they were a part of, while the boys won the majority of their events. The track team is not the only team to demonstrate an excellent performance. The girls basketball team won their home opener with O'Neill 64-19. Also, the boys basketball team won their home opener 42-37 against Goshen. Way to go to our amazing athletes. The drama club has announced its 2021 spring musical, where it will be performing an outdoor, socially distanced rendition of the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. This comical performance is planned to take place outside on the high school campus and provides the club its first opportunity to perform in person since the unfortunate abrupt ending to the Addams Family last March. The club, as well as the student body, is very excited about the opportunity and looks forward to enjoying CCHS's exceptional performances once again. Also, this month, 11 students were selected as winners of the Outstanding Dragon Award. These students were nominated by faculty and staff for a variety of reasons, including their exceptional character. Congratulations to this quarter's awardees. Congratulations are also in order for Catherine Gagnon and Isabella Crow, who both recently received the prestigious designation of National Merit Scholars. Their hard work and dedication has paid off, and we are so proud of their achievements. In other news, it was recently announced that the high school students will be logging onto Google Meets on their days of remote instruction. And upon hearing the announcement, students did not hesitate to voice their opinions. As representatives of the entire student body, we would like to inform you that there are student concerns over whether students will be able to focus on screen or how they will manage their time. While the nature of a virtual school day makes it so that students will be on a screen all day, whether it's on Google Meet or Google Classroom, we'd be remiss not to mention the concerns of some of our peers. Yet, we are also hopeful that this change in instruction will promote a more effective academic experience for our students and lead us in the direction toward normalcy that we all desperately are pursuing. Finally, Josh and I would like to inform the board of how popular this February break was. It is perfectly timed to divide the 12-week stretch between the holiday break and spring break into 2 parts, giving our students a much needed break, especially this year during the pandemic. We are grateful for this break that we have not gotten in the past, and if possible, encourage it to be considered for the upcoming years.
Okay, thank you both so very much. Always a joy to have you with us. Next item of business is we're going to move on to committee updates. Brendan, I'm going to ask you first. Are there any committee updates that you can share with us?
Just a, I mean, kind of the other side of the legislative coin. We met with Assemblyman Schmidt last week and continued our advocacy. Same points were hit that we hit with Senator Skoufis. So, but that was really the only update in the last couple of weeks.
Okay, thank you so much. Larry, anything to update us on?
Briefly, the building addition survey is complete, And Harvey's office is just finishing up its input into the state ed's portal. So we're getting closer to getting it to us.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyone else have any committee updates? John, did you have anything for us?
Only that the audit committee will meet March 3rd. That's the only update.
Okay, thank you. All right, anyone else? Okay, thank you so much. We're gonna move on to our superintendent's update. And Terry, I turn the floor over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Just have a few updates. Two are piggybacking on our awesome student reps. First, athletics, as they mentioned, are going strong. Cornwall Athletics has also launched a YouTube live streaming to be able to partake in watching those competitions and meets. So I would encourage you, if you didn't, you should have gotten the alert. If not, it's on our webpage as well. And we've also started receiving proposals from clubs and arts and extracurriculars for in-person activities as well. As you heard, the drama club is already moving forward with its production and others. So we're excited to, like Giselle said, move closer and closer to normalcy here in Cornwall. Also, just want to double down on the excitement that we have for Isabella and Catherine. Being named finalists is no small feat. Just to give the community at large just the magnitude of this recognition, 1.5 million high schoolers take the PSAT, 1.5 million. Thus becoming eligible for this recognition. Out of that, 50,000 high schoolers, our top performers, earn a rating of commended. Out of that 50,000, 16,000, I'm sorry, out of that 50,000, 16,000 earn the recognition of semifinalists. Out of that 16,000, we narrow it down to about 15,000 who are named finalists, and that's where Isabella and Catherine are. And then we know that they will represent us well as the committee reviews all of these high-performing students, thus selecting 7,600 merit scholarship award winners. So stay tuned, but huge congratulations to Isabella and Catherine for their outstanding academic achievements. And then finally, there's been quite a buzz in Greater Cornwall with regards to in-person instruction and some updates going on at the state level and national level. So I want to spend some time on that, just making sure everyone has facts as they read lots of things on social media and the like. Please make sure that you're asking me, send us an email if you need clarification on anything. So the two biggest announcements were, Governor Cuomo during his briefing stated repeatedly schools should be open in person. He said he said that since day one. I just would like to articulate that that's great for a soundbite, but to actually make it happen with the current mandates that all school districts in the state of New York are expected to follow is near impossible. So if you have a couple of minutes or an hour of free time over coffee or tea, simply Google in-person instruction in New York, Cuomo briefings or the like, and you'll really see what all superintendents across the state are grappling with. The number one issue that you will see pop up, the absolute number one, will be the 6-foot distancing mandate. So notice how I didn't say Cuomo said, open all schools and we're alleviating the 6-foot distancing mandate. He did not say that. He said simply open the schools. If staff members are scared, vaccinate the staff. These are two items that the Board of Education and the superintendent and all of my staff have no control over. We don't control who gets vaccinated in the state of New York. We don't run the lists and things of that nature. So again, it's easier said than done. So to be abundantly clear, this is not a superintendent decision. It is not a Board of Education decision whether we're opening our schools 5 days a week in person. It is a New York State mandate right now that is holding us back from moving forward with that. On a much more positive news, the CDC recently released with the US Department of Education jointly released updated guidance for reopening schools. Remember, our most recent guidance from New York State occurred in mid-July. A lot has happened since July of 2020 to where we are now with regards to what we know about transmission, the way our community is responding and the like. So I applaud CDC for updating their guidelines. I would hope that our state would do the same with all of our updated information. Two really pertinent pieces of the CDC guidance. There was no change to what we know works for mitigating spread. Masking, physical distancing, hand hygiene, watching your symptoms and staying home if you're sick, and then contact tracing. Those have held true since we developed our opening plan for Cornwall. The updated information from the CDC puts the data front and center. They have 4 levels of community rates that they really highlight as things that we should all be paying attention to. A low rate of spread, which is less than 5%. A moderate rate, which is 5 to 7.9% community 7-day kind of average. Substantial, which is 8 to 9.9%, and high, which is greater than or equal to 10%. The key piece that I would encourage the Board of Education in our community, when you're doing your advocacy, the CDC says at low and moderate rates, you physical distance to the greatest extent possible, but it is not required. Again, at low and moderate rates, that means if our rate, which it is currently, is below 7.9%, then physical distancing is not required. It's to the greatest extent possible. Then they clearly state in substantial and high communities, it is absolutely required to social distance at 6 foot minimum. That's a clear change in guidance that we have in New York State. So when we're advocating at the state level or with our county legislation, this is something I'm hoping the community really rallies around, is that let's take a look at our community and how we're responding and how we're doing with transmission rates rather than depending on the whole county or the state for that guidance. So big update from CDC. We are not permitted to just follow what CDC says. Again, it is New York State Department of Health would have to say, yes, we agree with the CDC and schools can move forward with the CDC recommendations. And then finally, there's been a bit of a swirl of, why isn't there an update on next year's reopening plan? I just have to remind you that our team cannot get to work on a reopening plan for 21-22 until we receive guidance from New York State Department of Health and New York State Education Department. So we can't engage in that work really until we get that guidance. So that's why there's no talk of definitive plans for next year, because we don't have the mandates yet that we would have to adhere to before doing that. This is the 145 pages of reading goodness that we had to follow in July. There's 145 pages of what we had to incorporate into our reopening plan for this year. That's what we're waiting on for the 21-22 school year. That's all I had, Nancy.
Thank you so much. That was a lot, and that was some very good information. Thank you, Terry.
Nancy,
Thank you.
Yep.
I got a question for Terry. Is that okay?
Yeah, go right ahead.
Hey, thank you so much. Terry, great update. Thank you for addressing some of the, how should we say, misinformation that's swirling around, not only in social media, but also in the newspapers. The newspapers are also a little bit guilty in terms of spreading false information. The CDC's, I think, report was issued after our last board meeting, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Have you gone through that report from the CDC and their guidelines to see how we might be able to get into in person if the state were to eventually catch up? Maybe they're evaluating right now that that guidance on what it means to the extent possible. Is that currently underway? So
Yeah.
say again.
So I've reviewed it, and I participated in a webinar with one of the top officials with the CDC and one of the top officials with NICID, with just superintendents from across the state, where we were able to ask a lot of clarifying questions. So we have engaged in that analysis already.
Oh, fantastic. So maybe this question might have already been addressed in that forum that you participated in. So focus has always been at 6 feet, and there's been confusion about 6 feet with mask and 6 feet without mask. Just for everyone's edification, the 6 foot distance on physical distancing was really a function of a different outbreak, and that was tuberculosis, believe it or not. That's how we came up with 6 feet, and it was done by a guy named Dr. Wells, and it goes back to Harvard. And if you ever want to Google, you'll see that what was adopted then is what was basically applied now. But there's also been the notion that with masks, 6 feet can be reduced to 3 feet, especially in settings where you're contained for a while, right? So my question is, if New York State were to migrate from 3 or from 6 to 3, could we get in person 5 days a week? Do we have the capacity, the square footage to accommodate that?
So we haven't done that analysis yet, but for the board and the community, there's a few things clear within the CDC guidelines. One is universal masking, so that would hold true for next year. Is just universal masking at all times. And then 2, they did not denote a foot distance. So to what John was explaining, there's different. They talked about mitigation strategies and what your community spread is looking like. So if you're in a high or substantial zone, you really want to be clearly following all of the mitigation guidelines. As that comes down to the lower transmission rates, then they said you're much more flexible on to the greatest extent possible. So not clearly establishing a 3 foot, but when all possible, distance as much as possible, knowing that spacing in schools is one of the largest barriers to in-person instruction. So they did not denote a specific, if you're in low or moderate, you can go down to 2 feet or 3 feet. They did not denote that at all. They just said physical distancing to the greatest extent possible.
Okay. So Nancy, I think as we engage our elected officials at the state level and the county, I think we should avoid this notion of 6, 3, or whatever, but focus on to the greatest extent possible while we're in the heat map color of yellow and below, right? It's only when orange does it 6 feet become mandatory, as I understand the CDC guidance. So as we engage them, I think using the operative phrase that I heard Terry just recite, to the greatest extent possible, should be what we lobby for. That would be my suggestion.
I agree with that. Just to hop in, I think the CDC did us a great favor there by simplifying, instead of having to construct the argument from scratch. Now the argument is the state needs to adopt what the CDC has laid out. And why does the state know more than the CDC?
Agreed.
Yeah.
I would just add, because I know that, Terry, you touched on the 6 feet and masks thing, and this is like the whack-a-mole that doesn't go away, like the argument just keeps coming back up and up. And there was a post on social media that got me questioning myself, because it made it seem like it was something from New York State. I believe it was NewYorkState.gov, but it was a school reopening, the official school reopening PDF. And I know this caused a stir, because it said if 6 feet of distance cannot be maintained, students and staff must be masked. So this got me thinking, well, that does sound like 6 feet or instead of 6 feet and. So to clarify this, I feel like I've done this now many times. I actually got in touch with the State Department, because Orange County Department, I've just exhausted that. And so I went to the State Department, and they clarified that it is 6 feet and masks. Apparently, the official school opening PDF was not worded very clearly, which is not what you want to hear. And that, in fact, there was another PDF that was linked to the original PDF that's much clearer, which is like, get me out of this universe. I want people to understand, as difficult as this is for everybody to understand in the community, this lack of clarity has started from the top, to the point where the state education department has a PDF that is, I completely agree with you, giving the wrong impression, linking to another PDF that clarifies it, but everything has been up on their website since August. So I don't blame anybody for not being clear about this. I have followed the breadcrumbs, so to speak, and gotten to, I would say it's the truth, but who knows, right? It's been so unreliable. I don't want to vouch for anybody. All I can say is this is the information I've gotten from them. They understand the lack of clarity, but they say that it is 6 feet and masks. So on that point, I know it's something that we need to keep clarifying, but I think like I said, I think the CDC has done us a favor here for our own advocacy, which will continue, because now we don't have to focus as much on these arguments that keep going in a circle.
If you'll excuse me, even one of the chats just now, it's like there should be advanced courses in COVID education. And I was just looking at one of the chats where they're saying about recommendations for 6 feet. And I think, again, it comes down to the CDC is giving out some information, but then the state of New York, and in today's political climate, I excuse the term I use, but the state trumps the CDC, because it's conflicting information all the way around. Even sitting here listening to this just now and looking at chats that are coming up, it's very confusing. Recommended, required, the CDC, and then the state. And parents want to know what the school district is doing, and I don't blame them, because I've spoken to some grandparents in the community, and they say, well, why isn't the school district advocating? And we are. Brendan, the superintendent, the cabinet, I know that, the board members. But on the other hand, someone also asked me, what happens if you don't follow? And I come from the radical 70s, so not following rules is just fine with me sometimes. But they said, what's the consequences if you don't follow?
I can
Now,
answer that.
I thought, okay, that's a good question. Why don't I ask Mr. Dade? What are the consequences? Do they get rid? Can they fire the entire board and the superintendent and the cabinet? Can they withhold funding? I'm just curious at this point, because someone was very serious about that. Why don't you just say, I'm not going to listen to you, Mr. Cuomo?
So in the first 2 or 3 months, there were enforcement teams going around districts. I don't know what their official terminology was, but some superintendents shared their experience of an armed deputy with someone from the county health department showing up to investigate complaints with a cease and desist letter in hand if the complaint turned out to be true. what that cease and desist order would do would be to shut the district down for any in-person instruction. It would pivot the entire district to full remote until whatever dispute was solved. So that was the experience of quite a few districts across the state in the first few months, as people were much more anxious then of how people were wearing masks, whether people were wearing them appropriately or not, distancing and the like. So that's what is the enforcement side of that question.
The other question, is there any talk about superintendents? I realize you're on webinars and I know you're communicating within the county and probably on a state level. I don't doubt that. But is there any talk about a movement of superintendents or a representative from the school district going en masse with other school districts from around the state to the governor's office, or meeting with the governor as a group?
I haven't heard that.
I know you have all the time in the world to do that, Terry, all of you. I realize that. I'm not buying you a bus ticket. I'm just curious if there's any talk of that. Because I understand parents are getting frustrated across the state. And my daughter's school district in Westchester, and they're asking who's fighting on this end.
Mhm.
And it's a fair question. I know there's a lot of things done behind the scenes that people aren't aware of.
I think it's a fair question. I would encourage as much advocacy as possible. From what I've seen, there's been a lot of local advocacy. So every news clip I read is Buffalo parents and advocating and protesting there. Our own parents have done a great job protesting right here in Orange County. I would argue, I don't know what Brendan might say, that it may be energy spent in the wrong area. I think it's pretty clear that the decision maker is at the state level. So whatever we need to do to advocate at that level, I think is needed. Again, we have all the information that we need. Our district would be able to move forward with in-person instruction if we follow the simple chart on page 17, where it just clearly shows what the rates of transmission are and where physical distancing is required and where it's not. That's what we're looking for moving forward. As people ask what we're doing to advocate, outside of we've written letters directly to Dr. Zucker, who's the Commissioner of Health for New York State Department of Health. We've written letters to Dr. Gelman, as we've gotten better at what is under her control versus state control. Something that we're advocating for at the local level is close contact quarantining versus precautionary quarantine. Josh and Giselle can tell you, with the precautionary quarantine, if you're in the same cafeteria as a positive case, no matter if you are 50 to 100 feet away, you are still knocked out. We don't think that there's any science behind that. We're not seeing positive cases result from us quarantining all of these high school students each and every week. So that's something that we're advocating at the local level that we believe can be changed, but it again gets kicked up to the state level, which is pretty frustrating for us here.
We can attest to that. It's somewhat nonsensical, but yeah, it's just so far reaching because you're quarantined and then your family worries about it. So yeah, that advocacy has definitely been well founded as well.
I'd like to make an observation. I know that school boards have been, through their superintendent, have been advocating. I know that district superintendents, the BOCES district superintendents have been advocating. Those people, when you add them all up, are a minuscule, a very small amount of voters. The people that can really get a change are the voters in this state. And they will respond, Albany will respond to voters. And now it comes back to our community. If our community can get all together and do this, now all of a sudden they're going to see votes. And now maybe something else will happen.
Terry, I have a question for you also. You mentioned from the CDC, the low rate of spread less than 5%. Have they said how they figure that out, what it's based on? Is it the daily rate? Is it, because if I look back through the numbers for Cornwall, and actually even New Windsor, because New Windsor's population is quite high compared to Cornwall, it's over twice, where if I look at the daily rate, we're at under 1/4% based on how I figured it out. And I was kind of wondering how they figured it out.
Yeah, in the footnote, they just said levels of community transmission. So they don't define it as anything beyond community.
Okay.
I do believe if we follow the microcluster strategy, which actually did get some legs, that really does get down to individual neighborhoods and where the actual school sits and the likes. I think that we have a good strategy currently in the state that could lend itself to the blue, yellow, orange, and red that we see from the CDC.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Terry,
Terry.
private, did someone want to
Nina,
ask?
yeah,
Go
we're gonna
ahead,
let Nina,
Teresa.
go ahead.
I'm just curious, you were saying that you were on a call with a senior official from the CDC as well as some of your New York State superintendent colleagues. Was there discussion in that meeting in terms of, what the push is amongst the various districts and that organization of superintendent? Do they advocate as a collective, lobbying body to push the state to more quickly update their guidance so that, we can move this forward? I think to Larry's point, certainly the voters are a strong voice, but I think the more places we can come from and the more united ways that we can approach this to try to get to, a 5-day in-person in a safe manner, if, that's truly what we're seeing that most people want. Obviously safe is the key word, but does that body lobby?
It does. The group that I was a part of was the AASA, which is nationwide. As you know, people are doing things very differently than New York. So I'm not sure that we would get that same advocacy that we might with our New York-based Council of School Superintendents. So I'll definitely follow up on that, Nina, to see if they've sent anything officially on behalf of superintendents. I can say with absolute certainty, the number one concern from superintendents is the physical distancing. You can't say reopen schools and keep the 6-foot social distancing. No one, imagine what our schools would look like if we had all that extra space. I mean, that's not how they were built. They were built for class sizes of 25 and the like. So they're just not built that way to accommodate as such.
Really seems
There has
to
to
be
be
the
a
crux
ripple
of the matter right now in terms
It
of,
is.
whether we can get everybody back 5 days. So I think whatever that dialogue is through whatever lobbying group, that is the focus.
Agreed.
And Terry, you hear rumors, around town and all the scuttlebutt everybody talks about. That concept of, there's a warehouse someplace or the library that's not being used, the basement of the church kind of scenario. If we could, wherever we could put kids safely, that correct me if I'm wrong, that would lend to, added teachers to some capacity or other, wouldn't that be?
Yeah, it absolutely would. So imagine, let's just take our COH, putting half of the students in another space would essentially double the number of staff members needed. So it's a great thought, and we've heard it as well, but staffing implications would be significant for us here. All of those students would have to be supervised. So it would be like opening a whole nother school, and we would have to budget for that number of staffing.
And Louis, just to add on to what Terry said, in addition to that, you're looking at obviously extra custodial staff. The district has taken tremendous care since a year ago to make sure ventilation was improved, all sorts of things like that, cleaning and everything like that. And I know that to go into another, and I know you know this, but to go into another building and just, it's not gonna have the safeguards that we have put in place in this district for our classrooms and our buildings. And other places may not even want groups in there, because I know some places have cut that back completely as well. So while it's a nice thought, I think totally cost prohibitive, but you'd also be missing a lot of those air filtration systems and a lot of those other things that we have put in place since last year all along the way. So
I think you're adding liability issues too, as soon as you go outside of the area of the school district that's been, approved by the different inspectors that come across and all that kind of thing. When you go outside of now inspected buildings and the like, now you add the district, you add increased liability as well.
Terry, a question I have, because I'm not even sure about it. I've tried to look into it. Private schools, parochial schools, do they have to follow the state, or can they follow just the CDC?
So from what I believe, and we can get confirmation from Orange County, I've been told that a pandemic is a pandemic. You don't peel off private versus public, that if you're trying to mitigate spread, that everyone's following the same rules and expectations. I do know that some private schools are able to do full in person just by sheer numbers. So when you talk about a school versus a district, it's a little bit easier to think of creative use of space and the like. But from what I've been told, you're expected to follow the same mandates established by the New York State Department of Health.
Okay. I don't think, obviously, I don't think everyone is. That's why I wonder about the repercussions, because I think there's a different standard being held as far as accountability, if nothing else. It's just realistic. It's really insane. As I have 2 grandchildren in Fairfax that haven't seen a classroom since March of last year. And I have 1 grandson in Milford, Pennsylvania, Delaware Valley that hasn't missed a day of full-time school. It's just, no wonder parents are confused. No wonder everybody's confused. There's no continuity. There's no common sense at all. We can maybe hope they'll take Governor Cuomo's executive powers away from him. I know I've got my hopes up in there, but that's me. So
Terry, if I recall, last year, before the close of school, there was also talk about non-compliance with state mandates would threaten funding. I think
that's what I thought too.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
That would parlay into the private schools not really having to worry about that, so much of that, that leg of it.
Definitely.
Yeah, I think you're right, Louis. That's what I had heard also.
Private schools get funding from state aid, and they are under the same requirements. They have done different things, just like some public schools in New York State, upstate, have done different things and have received waivers from the state as it pertains to, say, the 6-foot distancing rule.
Explain that, John. What do you mean
How
they've
do you
gotten
get a
waivers?
waiver?
I don't know if you've seen it, but you've seen a desk 3 feet away from another desk that has enclosed in plexiglass. Have you seen those types?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's how you get around it.
Well, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Brian.
No, go ahead. I guess I misunderstood the waiver. That's all. I was gonna say.
That's not a waiver. Because I was going to
It
say
is a
every
waiver
parent in
because you
Cornwall, every parent in Cornwall is going to ask for a waiver, but no, I know that they're provided, they're paid for by school districts. Some of the school districts that have the money, they're very costly. Some of them have been put aside for testing. And you mean those screens that people have been using? I don't know what the cost of that would be. And would that be a waiver, or is that again part of the governor? Does he say in there, if you have one of those plastic barricades, does that then reduce the need for 6 feet? Is that clearly stated anywhere?
It is in the guidance documents that Brendan was referencing, that 6 foot or a barrier is part of that piece. I can tell you, I just want to kind of take us back in time. If you just recall how anxious our community was for reopening period with half of our students, just please don't lose sight of that. So for reopening purposes, we felt that our community would not support bringing all of our students in and having absolutely full classes with barriers everywhere. I strongly feel that that would have been a no-go. If you just think about how anxious everything was to have full buildings, it would have been a no-go. Now you fast forward with vaccines nearing herd immunity becoming part of the conversation and the like, mindsets change. Unfortunately, our budget doesn't grow over the course of time. Our budget has been diminished significantly just to get us up to speed and where we need to be with the health and safety protocols in the hybrid model. So we have looked into what it would cost at the beginning of the year, just to get the plexiglass fitted for the large cafeteria spaces and the like was an endeavor. But the other piece that we just have to realize is just think of all the different desktops and the like that we would be trying to outfit for barriers. So again, people are going to turn this into a simple funding piece. It is not that easy. When you think of all the different pieces that go with just plexiglass and barriers and what some school districts have done, you're not seeing this as a widespread solution to school reopenings. Everyone's going to find me examples of schools that are doing that, but the vast majority are in the hybrid model, or they've been able to find additional space. So again, if we could advocate for what we know is going to serve our students best, my argument would be the CDC has given us the roadmap. To Brendan's point, it's not like we're creating something that we're asking New York State to adopt. We're saying simply follow the CDC guidance that has been coupled with the US Department of Education to open schools safely across the nation.
Yeah, I think I totally agree that we have to approach this on a number of different tracks. Advocacy needs to be part of it. I'll touch on that, loop back to that in a second. Just about the challenges for the plexiglass there, Terry. So it's not just cost. You're saying, is there some sort of regulatory burden that we need to overcome? Like, I just want to get a sense of what the full range of complications there are.
And Harvey did a lot of this work with Walter and his team. I mean, we actually had to work with architects to make sure it met all the different safety requirements. So it's, I know I've seen pictures of shower curtains and the like. That's not going to cut it. That's just not going to pass any kind of fire inspection for all of our classrooms and the like. But Harvey, I don't know if you have any additional details of kind of what some of our parameters were as we thought through study hall, cafeteria space at all 3 levels, and to get this done for reopening.
Yeah, sure. There were 2 key areas, and they weren't cost. I mean, certainly this stuff costs money, and we can redirect as we have. But when it came to just talking about the cafeterias and the large areas, we couldn't just get a piece of plexiglass and put it on the table. Okay, there were several issues that any district would be confronted with. One is most every tabletop in a school district is some kind of a laminate. Okay, so when you put a smooth surface on another smooth surface, these things are sliding all over the place, falling on the floor, cracking, breaking, etc. So we had to have an actual system in place where they would actually be adhered to the desk or the tabletop. Sounds pretty simple, but we literally had to bring the architects in. And the reason for that is because state education department was requiring us to do this in such a manner that conforms with all of their requirements. So we did that and we were successful. The other is cleaning. If you can imagine, we have approximately 3,000 students in the district, 3,000 desks. And what do you do to clean these both in between periods and or every night? It would literally require a troop of additional custodial workers. So those are the two key areas. And we've been able to manage it in the cafeterias and so forth because we're not dealing with 3,000 different ones. We have, in all the schools, we're probably talking about a couple hundred. But those are the two key areas.
Would it be the part about cleaning, is that part of a state mandate, or would it be feasible for having kids essentially self-clean at the end of each period? There's a wipe down. Obviously, that would require resources in the way of wipes, but I'm just wondering what's mandated and what's just what would be our room to get creative?
Sure. Well, on one front, there has been guidance put out that children are not allowed to use any kind of certain disinfectant or disinfecting wipes. As far as a student actually doing it with something they could use, how do you enforce that? I mean, what if a child says no? What if a child walks out and doesn't do it? You need a standardized system to make this work. What about the liability? What if someone becomes sick and then they ask for, well, what's the protocol in this particular classroom? Right now, when Walter's group goes through a classroom, we actually maintain a log every single day, every single night. So again, it's protocol, and it's really, there's the unspoken word of the liability issue too, that no one's brought up in a long time.
What if we just, I could see where that could never, I don't believe it could work in middle and high school where children are moving around from class to class or any area. But in the elementary level, is there a possibility that could be addressed because children are staying in that classroom, perhaps eating in that classroom? I'm just throwing some ideas out because of the elementary, the younger students. I don't think anything would really work with the older students walking around and going from class to class. But is there any possibility that we could work something out, at least as a start with the elementary students or younger children?
Yeah, we
Since
can
they
definitely
stay in the classroom?
we can definitely do some more research just to see cost and feasibility. Again, this is something that we reviewed at the beginning of the year and did not see it as the right option. We can do it now. Again, I just want to remind folks in watching who are expressing their opinions, which is fine, but a month ago, we were in a different state. We were talking about mandatory closures for school districts because of spread after the Thanksgiving break, after the winter holiday. So I just want to make sure that everyone's managing, kind of thinking through the entire year and not just the current state. So we'll definitely do some more research to get back of what the feasibility is and get back to the board and community.
Okay,
you,
Terry,
Terry.
thanks very much. I think we're gonna move on
Hey,
now.
Nancy, if we could, just one thing that is similar in topic, but not one of the pillars that we've heard about as it pertains to the actions for the mitigation actions that Terry illuminated. And I think one of the things that CDC mentioned was actually community involvement. And it seems to me that a lot has changed since we went out to the community back in the early fall, late summer, about asking about what people's preferences were and what they were thinking. Is it possible now that we have better information in a sense to re-poll the community, the parents, to find out where they're leaning between in-person, remote, hybrid, to see if maybe there's enough people that are more interested in remote now that we can stream it live, that may not want to send their kid to school if given the option. And that would free up everyone else to socially distance at the current time. I think it's important to engage the community, and I would request that we kind of pull the net again in terms of the community on where they see their preferences.
I think Brendan had said when we had that community meeting online a couple of weeks ago, Brendan said at that time that he was going to update with a new, please correct me if I'm wrong, Brendan, but you were going to do a new poll within a certain amount of time to update.
I would love to take credit for that idea. I did not say
Oh.
that. Certainly I didn't say it in those words, but I was thinking of for another forum, right?
Yes, for
Not-
another
but-
forum, but it could serve the same purpose. And
Sure.
you've already done it once, so I would think you could, probably do something like that again.
I think it's a great idea. I know the last time this poll was done, there have been polls that have come from the board, but then also from the district. The last time we did this particular kind of poll, it came from the district and I think it was the end of summer. I mean, I'm certainly willing to do whatever I can to help anything, but I think that the capacity is probably at the district level for this kind of poll. But certainly, I mean, I second John's recommendation there.
I think
Okay.
when we finished that forum, that was one of the suggestions that we do a new poll, and
That certainly came.
I
up,
would
yeah.
say, I highly support, going back and seeing what we can do, and, perhaps even finding that availability if some people want to be on a hybrid, as John suggested. And then other people in school that may give us the balance that we want now that we can stream.
Okay, thank you all very much. This has been excellent, and I think we've left Terry and Megan and everyone else with a lot of food for thought and things to perhaps come back to us with as well. We're next up on the agenda is public comments. I have three emails rather, that we've received. The first one is from Megan Sandler. At the Board of Education work session on February 8th, 2021, I noticed the addition of one full-time strings music teacher for the district. I'm a mother of 4 children, all who have participated in the Sprint Strings program in the Cornwall Central School District. All of my children will have started and ended their strings career with Kevin Franco while being educated by Tracy Decker at the middle school level. After witnessing 9 years of strings education, I see the dedication and commitment of these and other music teachers in the district. Even as I write this on a cold winter afternoon, I am graced by the sounds of Bach's Cello Suite No. 1 being played by my junior in high school as he prepares to qualify for an all-state cellist. At the same time, I hear the sounds of my 6th grader practicing the same piece that all of my other 3 older children played as he prepares for his own chance to perform in the All-County Orchestra, even if it might be virtual, in 2021. I would like to fervently declare my support for the addition of a music strings teacher to CCSD. The growth of the program, as well as the retention of students up to the high school level, has clearly stretched our strings teachers beyond their capacity. As most teachers in Cornwall, these teachers make it work. However, I can imagine how the addition of one FTE could greatly benefit hundreds of students in our district. I implore you and the other board members to retain this valuable asset to the 2021-22 budget. I will be sending this correspondence to each of the board members to beseech you to keep this position. Thank you for your time and consideration. Our second note was from Rebecca Barth. Dear board members, I would like to offer my strong support of Mr. Sotland's recent proposal at the Board of Ed work session meeting on February 8th to add a full-time music teacher, specifically a strings teacher, to the Cornwall Central School District. I'm the parent of one CCSD student and one CCSD alumna, both of whom have enjoyed and thrived within the music education program, specifically the strings program provided at their schools. To underscore that point, my daughter, who graduated from CCHS in 2020, is currently studying music at the Crane School of Music, SUNY Potsdam. The dedicated music faculty of the CCSD deserve a share in the credit for that. In particular, I would like to single out the role Kevin Franca has played in in making my children's music education exceptional. His knowledge and skill with stringed instruments, along with his easy and genuine connection with students, are principal reasons why the strings program in CCSD is the success that it is. In fact, my daughter was so invested in the strings program at CCHS that she had the honor to serve as vice president for the CCHS orchestra in her senior year. As such, she had a close-up view of just how convoluted Mr. Franca's schedule could be on any given day. Traveling back and forth between the high school and the elementary schools more often than not presents challenges to scheduling time for lessons, ensemble practices, or even a moment for extra individualized help. While Mr. Franca is always quick to bend over backward for his students, he plainly cannot be in two places at once, serving the needs of the large number of students he currently has. And while maintaining a schedule can meet a basic threshold of teaching, we are all keenly aware that teachable moments cannot always be scheduled. They often occur unexpectedly when teachers are simply present. My daughter remembers fondly the one year in her time in CCHS when Mr. Franca was not traveling between schools. What does it say that the easy accessibility of her teacher is a marked highlight of her overall orchestra experience? In this time of social distancing, when we see with fresh eyes the value of in-person time between teachers and students, I applaud the Board of Education for its consideration of this essential new position and ask that it remain an untouched provision during the entire budget approval process. And the last one we have is from Jim Cregan. My name is Jim Cregan, and I'm a parent to two students at the Cornwall and Hudson Elementary School. In recent weeks, myself and several other parents of the district have been trying to understand the roadblocks to returning our children to school in person 5 days a week. We all, of course, want this return to be done safely for all students, teachers, and staff. To date, there has not been a firm plan released to the public of when we will see the return to school, and there has even been discussion of continuing the current hybrid model next school year. Parents are growing increasingly frustrated in their communications with the district administrators, the Orange County Health Department, the Orange County Executive, and New York State. There is a maddening process where each level of government contacted points the finger at another organization and claims they do not have the power to bring children back because someone else is prohibiting them. In my communication with Mr. Date, it is obvious he is as frustrated with the runaround from various levels of government as parents are. I would like to make the following proposal to the district administrators and school board. To help navigate the current maze of recommendations and regulations from the CDC, New York State Department of Health, and Orange County, and to make sure that the efforts to open schools safely are communicated to all stakeholders, I propose a school reopening task force with membership from the following groups: district administration, school board, parents, teachers, and school level administration. I'd be happy to lead this effort and volunteer in any way I can to aid the district in returning our children safely to school. I thank you for your consideration and discussion of this matter. So thank you to those that sent in comments for this evening. The next item on the agenda is our consent agenda, new business. Use of the consent agenda permits the Board of Education, to make more effective use of its time by adopting a single motion to cover those relatively routine matters which are included. Any member of the board who wishes to discuss individually a particular piece of business on the consent agenda may so indicate, and that item will be considered and voted on separately. Is there any item on the consent agenda that anyone would like pulled off?
Nancy, number 3, the personnel actions, please.
Okay. 4 through 10. Okay. Okay, so it is recommended that the Board of Education approve the following consent agenda as submitted by the superintendent of schools, items 2 and items 4 through 10. Do I have a motion
So moved.
and a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, Louis,
Aye.
Matt's not here. Larry,
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Brendan,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Margaret,
Aye.
Nina, and myself, aye. Motion carried, thank you. Okay, so we have item number 3, personnel actions. Resolved upon the recommendation of the, oops, flip the page. Resolved upon the recommendation of the superintendent of schools, the Board of Education does hereby accept the following personnel actions, and I will take the rest as per document. Do I have a motion
So moved.
and a second? And discussion?
So in reviewing the document, I noticed the footnote at the bottom that said that all the coaching assignments that were made back in August are being rescinded and replaced by this action. I noticed that the girls tennis coach is not listed, only a JV coach. And so are we having a problem finding a girls tennis varsity coach?
Terry?
I don't think so, but we can investigate further and get back to the board.
That's fair. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other discussion? Okay, roll call. Louis,
Aye.
Larry,
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Brendan,
Aye.
John,
Aye.
Margaret,
Aye.
Nina? And Nina, I can't hear you. Okay, yeah, I think you're not muted, but I don't know if your volume's off. I think we had that problem last time. That's better, thank you, yes. And myself, aye, okay, motion carried. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so now we are up to presentations, and Harvey, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Nancy. Give me a second, if you would, please. Just let me share my screen. Okay, can everybody see that?
Yeah.
Okay, very good. So tonight we're going to continue our budget discussions. This is our second meeting, and we're going to be diving into the numbers, going through them and explaining what they mean. It's important to note right off the bat some of our budget goals here, the three key ones. First and foremost, we always strive and we continue to work to stay within the budget cap. I call it the budget cap, but it's referred to as the property tax cap. We also always, in whatever we do, we always want to maintain and keep our staff and our programs intact. We never want to mitigate or change that which is being successful. Lastly, we also want to continue to rebuild and grow our instructional operational programs. When we say rebuild, there are still some areas that we have lost years back that we haven't been able to get back in. And as far as moving forward, there's a host of instructional and operational programs that we would love to get more involved in for the benefit of the kids. Now, as we move forward into the pages that I'm going to be going through with you, it's important to note that the 2021-22 budget is a rollover budget. And what that means is that it has nothing new in it. If there's something that we no longer need, it is not in there. It has been taken out. So if we do nothing more than open our doors on July 1st, this is what we would need to maintain program and services. And it's not to say that we don't continue to seek additional funding. We do, and we always continue to seek cost savings. So with that said, we move to the expenditure side. The expenditure side is the budget. It's what we lay out to run our programs, our services, and everything under the sun. So for 2021-22 school year, the preliminary budget, the rollover budget, as I just indicated, is approximately $75.7 million. When we compare that to our 2021 current approved budget right now, we see an increase of about 1.2 million, which is a 1.62% increase. It's important as well to keep in mind that we have a variety of open items. These open items exist because here we are in February and there's still a lot of information before we get to April that we're still waiting on. These items, the key items, are a variety of different COSA rates from BOCES. A COSA rate is really the cost of a various program or service that we procure through BOCES. We have staff retirements. To date, we have received one retirement, and we expect to see more as we get closer to the end of March. Lastly, we have special ed annual reviews. As I indicated at the last meeting, These take place starting around January and they run right through the budget season. As you can see there, there's a host of different variables that will be affecting the budget for the students who their annual review has not yet occurred. We have out-of-district placements. Are they going to this facility or that school? Again, there's different tuition rates. What about the related services that they're going to be receiving? Again, are they getting services 1 time a week, 2 times a week? Are they getting them at all? We have students who might be graduating. And lastly, we have preschool students who are moving up from preschool into the school system. If we look at the revenue side, how do we pay for all of this? So our preliminary revenue projections right now for 21-22 are approximately 72.6 million. Again, when we compare that to our current year's projected revenue, there's an increase there of almost 2.2 million. So what makes up that increase? Where are we getting that from? Well, first of all, the first bullet point, it's important to note that the maximum allowable property tax increase that we could have as a district is 2.74%. You might recall the last meeting I talked about it being 2.73. We received our final bit of information and that just bumped it up by that 1/100%. So the most that the budget tax levy increase can go up is 1.371. That is not to say we are going to go to 2.74. We are not. So for purposes of our budget and revenue projections, we're using a 2.2% tax levy increase, which would generate 1.1 million. So that 1.1 is part of that total budget to budget increase. The next item that plays a factor in this is state aid. Our state aid increase is 1.4 million, 7.33%. It's quite a big increase. And I know that everybody's probably thinking, wait a minute, that's not what we heard. That's not what we talked about last meeting. That is correct. The number is correct because what we're talking about here is budget to budget. Last year's budget, the state aid that we received, came with a caveat. The governor indicated that there is going to most likely be a 20% reduction in state aid. So trying to be conservative and get in front of this, we reduced our state aid at that point in time by $1.2 million. It wasn't the full 20%, but it was still a significant amount for us. So essentially, we backed off and we reduced what we showed last year. As it turns out, the governor only recently indicated that he would not be taking this 20%. We will remain whole. So essentially what you're seeing here is last year's budget was lower than that which we will be receiving. And if we did not do that by reducing it by 1.2, our increase in state aid budget to budget then would only have been about $200,000. Okay. And then lastly, we have a decrease in miscellaneous revenue of about $350,000. What's really driving that is 3 key areas. The first one is we had some grants that were coming in this year that was specific to the security vestibule work that we're going to be doing. The other is interest income. Interest income has been reduced significantly due to market conditions and the interest rates themselves. And lastly, we typically have received a nice amount of foster care aid that we will not be receiving as the Angola home right on the circle has closed down. So consequently, we don't have those children in our school system right now. Most importantly, we're waiting for an open item here is the final state aid figures. There's a lot floating around out there, both with the federal stimulus, how it's going to impact the state. So we are waiting. There's so much speculation and so much conversation. We can't even begin to imagine what might actually pan out. I want to just touch on the property tax levy cap. There's still a lot of individuals in the community who are not familiar with how it actually works. First and foremost, it is not a 2% cap. There is a formula that the state has put in place back when it began in 12-13 budget year. and it can actually be below 2% and it can be above 2%. Should a district, any district, wish to exceed what their property tax levy cap actually is, it would require a 60% majority vote by the taxpayers. And lastly, and probably most significantly, if a district has their budget defeated twice, we must adopt a tax levy no greater than the current year's. So what that essentially means is that we would not be able to increase the tax levy. As I mentioned on the previous screen, the tax levy in our preliminary calculations is showing a $1.1 million increase. I can tell you right now, if we had to cut 1.1 million, that would be extremely impact to our programs, whether it's academic, athletics, or arts. They would be significant cuts. So looking at this and pulling all together the revenue, the expenditures, this will tell you kind of where we stand. The first line there is the preliminary budget of our expenditures, our rollover budget. There's our 75.7 million. That's what it's going to take to open the doors on July 1st. We have our preliminary revenue that we know about right now. That's 72.6 million. So currently, without the assignment of any fund balance, we have a shortfall of about 3.1 million. We are on a preliminary basis right now, we are saying that we would be allocating 3.2 million in fund balance. Keep in mind that currently, for the current year, 2021, the budget has 4.1 million assigned fund balance. That amount is unsustainable, and it is not a practical amount in terms of going forward with. That is why we have to work it down, and we can't bring it all the way down to where it should be right now. That's just far too much money. So the preliminary assigned fund balance is 3.2 million. What that nets out is that we're showing a surplus of about $72,000. Now, this is going to change. We have open items. This is going to go up a little. It's going to go up and down. Where it ends up, I don't know yet because we're still waiting on information. But this number, should it be a positive number, will play into addressing the various needs that we talked about in the last board meeting. Now, since we were talking about fund balance, what I wanted to do is I wanted to spend a little time on where we stand with our fund balance and our reserves. This chart shows you a 3-year picture of all of our reserves and all of our fund balances. What I'd like to do is just kind of take you through each one of them, because one of the questions I get very frequently is, why do we have so much money in reserves? Why do we have so much money in fund balance? And then the next day, I'll get just as many questions. Why don't we have more? Okay, so these are all good questions. And what I can tell you is that if you look at what we have and what the needs are, we need to have more. And I'm going to explain to you why. We're going to go through these. First of all, the very first one there is unassigned fund balance. The unassigned fund balance, think of that as our rainy day fund. It's not designated for any specific purpose. As I indicate on the first bullet point below, New York State holds us, every school district, to a 4% maximum of our total budget. Financial institutions out there, financial banks, they all are looking for reserves and fund balance of this, not to be 4, but to be between 5 and 10%. We can't go any higher. Okay, we're held to that by state law. Now, is that to say that you may not hear of some districts who have gone over 4% or some school districts who actually currently have over 4%? The answer is yes. And what happens is that there's really no teeth behind the regulation historically. They get a letter, they get a Dunning letter, and they get slapped on the wrist and they're told, work that down. So that's what unassigned fund balance is. We are at the maximum, and I'm not advocating that we go over that at this point in time. The next is the assigned fund balance. Again, this is the amount of money that the board designates to help offset the tax levy for each budget. We were at 2.4 last year. For this year is 4.1. The next is the tax certiorari. What is a tax certiorari reserve? A tax certiorari reserve is really to help the district pay for those refunds that we have to make to taxpayers who have challenged their tax assessment, their property tax assessment, and they've won. It's very simple. We don't have any say in it, other than they go to court. There's 3 different levels. They can address it on the town level, the local, or they can actually go to the state Supreme Court. Bottom line is that when the judge signs the paper and says that the assessment is too much and it has to be reduced, we have to make a refund. When we look at what those assessment challenges are right now, because every time someone makes an assessment challenge, they have to petition the school district as well. So we are in the know on every single situation. When we look at, if you look at the 3rd bullet point at the bottom, if we were to look at what the projected payout is on what we've been partitioned, what people have grieved, we would need approximately 1.2 million. If you look up above, we have 986,000. So the good news is we're not that far off. The bad news is we're not really quite there. So we need a little bit more. And when I say we owe 1.2, or that is our projection, that is based on our historical payout, which averages about 1/3 of what people are asking for. That doesn't mean that everybody gets 1/3. We're saying the average of the people who get a refund and those that don't averages out to 1/3 of what we are petitioned. The next item is the ERS pension contribution and the TRS. ERS being the employee retirement system, TRS teachers retirement system. The reason that there's 2 is because the employee retirement system covers our non-instructional staff. The teachers retirement system covers the instructional and administrative staff. Now, what this covers is that every time we pay somebody, we are required by law, by regulation, to make a contribution to either ERS or TRS by a specific percentage. We don't dictate that percentage, okay? That percentage can vary. We're going to go over what the pension contribution has been historically, coming up in a few pages, but the bottom line is that it can vary dramatically every single year. Just to give you some order of magnitude, a 1% change in the percentage could translate into about $400,000 of additional costs to the district. So it could be quite significant. In my opinion, this amount needs to be closer to about 400,000 more. I get that information based on the possibility of a 2% increase that might occur over a 2-year period. I'm going to be talking about what are the factors impacting the ERS and the TRS in a few minutes. But the reality is that both of those reserves need to be bumped up to be in a better comfort level. The next reserve is called the Employee Benefit Accrued Liability. This is really a very simple reserve in the sense that when anybody leaves the district, whether it's retirement or maybe they just leave for whatever reason, they may have accrued to them unpaid sick leave, personal leave, or vacation time. We have to pay that, okay? So what this does, this reserve, should we get hit with a significant amount of retirements or people leaving the districts, this would help us offset that amount that the district is required to pay. I will tell you that based on the 6 or 7 retirements that we typically have each year, that reserve is actually fully funded in terms of where it should be. I do not see us needing to add any more to that. The next one is the unemployment insurance reserve. As a school district, we are required to pay 100% of all insurance claims that are validated by the Department of Labor. If you were to look in our budget, line by line budget, historically, we always carry a line. It varies somewhere around $65,000 to $75,000. And that has always been adequate to pay for our insurance costs, our unemployment insurance costs. Unfortunately, in today's times with COVID, we are right now about halfway through the school year. The budget for this year is 65. We have already spent 62. So that in and of itself is a good example of why you need these reserves to be a little bit higher. My recommendation is that to have us in a comfort level, you want to have a reserve that can weather you through a couple of years of bad times. So that unemployment insurance reserve could easily go up to about $150,000. And that leads us to our last reserve, which is the capital reserve. This is to pay for future capital improvements of any or all of the facilities in the school district. And the benefit of this reserve is that it actually helps reduce the taxpayer impact on those capital expenditures. We don't have to borrow as much, which means we don't have debt service, which means we don't have to budget as much. Back in March of 2018, the district established a capital reserve, this reserve, with a maximum cap of $5 million. Based on the needs of the district, I don't think anybody is unfamiliar with that, based on the several votes that we've had and did not pass with capital projects. That capital reserve needs to be fully funded. We need to get that up to $5 million, and that will dramatically help keep the taxpayers' tax levy where it is, and at the same time, address a significant portion of the needs. So all in all, when we look at what I mentioned here in terms of where things should be, we're looking at about needing approximately another $4 million in fund balance and reserves to be in a more stable position. And when I say stable, again, addressing the individuals who say, why do we have so much already? Whenever there's a financial impact of any kind of major consequence to the district, whether it's non-recurring or unforeseen, these particular lines help. It also affects our bond rating. The healthier our reserves, the healthier our fund balance, the bond rating company looks at that very favorably. And as a result, when we do need to borrow money for capital projects, we save on interest costs. Now, so far we've talked kind of at a high level. We're at the point where we're going to dig into the respective areas that make up the budget. On the left are 11 categories that make up the budget, totaling $75.7 million. We have the current 21-22 budget. I have the current budget, which was approved, and you can see the increase or decrease. We're going to go through each one of these. So the very first one here is salaries. Specific just to salaries, the rollover budget calls for $37.6 million. When we compare it to the current year, it's up about $1 million, 2.87%. What does this include? This includes every and all forms of compensation: salaries, additional stipends, tutorials to the children, homebound instruction, substitutes, and overtime hours. Those individuals, those employees that are receiving this are comprised of 6 collective bargaining units, as well as some individuals who have individual contracts. The individual contracts have to do with the individuals in the district office, such as the superintendent, myself. Additionally, there's individuals throughout the district. There's some clerical and IT technicians who have their own contract. They're not part of a particular unit. It's important to note that I have food service there, but the food service are really not part of those numbers above. And the reason for that is because they are a separate entity. By law, the cafeteria fund is a self-sustaining fund. It gets its revenue from the children and from the staff who purchase lunch, breakfast. And the intent is that it does not impact the general fund budget. Next, we move to pensions. As I indicated before, there's really three pieces of this. We talked about TRS and ERS. The total amount totals $7 million for the 21-22 school year, up from 6.7. So that's an increase of 321,000. In addition to ERS and TRS, we also include in here Social Security. As you can see on the table on the bottom, TRS and ERS have both increased for the 21-22 school year, the percentage. Now, while TRS didn't go up too much, ERS went up more. TRS is tied to the market, to the stock market. It's based on a 5-year rolling average. Now, some of you may say, now, wait a minute, the rate just went up. The market's been on fire for many years. Why is it that they are bumping up the rate when the stock market is going up? And the reason for that is because in their actuarial calculations, they are lowering their expectations moving forward. Even though the market is in fact doing better so far, they do not believe it'll sustain itself. So in their actuarial calculations, they are reducing their expected rate of return. Okay. ERS, that is calculated by the state. We have no say or input in that. That went up almost 1 full percent. Social Security stays the same, 7.65%. Now, I've given you a history here of looking back 8 years at TRS, ERS, and Social Security. You can forget about Social Security really because that hasn't changed for many, many moons. For all intents and purposes, things have been trending down. If you go back to 14, 15, you can see how high these rates were. Yes, it tweaked up a little bit this year, but generally speaking, over the 8 years, it's been trending downward, which is good. The next area is health insurance. The district pays approximately $10 million a year in health insurance. As you can see here for 21-22, it's 9.7 million versus about 10.1 for the current year. This is fabulous news. It's a decrease of about $416,000, which helps us tremendously. Now, the reason for that is indicated in the first paragraph below. We as a school district have 2 health plans. We have the Orange Ulster Health Plan, which is a self-funded municipal cooperative. It's made up of 17 school districts and the Orange Ulster BOCES. And we also are part of NYSHIP. This is the state plan, and it is a huge plan. It's 1.2 million public employees. As you can see there, the Orange Ulster Health Plan will be having a 0 increase in premiums next year. The plan has been doing very well, and there's no need at this point in time to increase the rates. NYSHIP, their rates have changed. Some rates dropped down almost 20%, and some went up 4.2%. Okay. So that's the lion's share of that number up above. Now, what I will tell you is, if you go to the 3rd bullet point there, we also have buyouts. Okay. What happens with a buyout is that if somebody is covered on another health plan, and that could be maybe a spouse under other spouses' plans, so they basically are allowed to take what we call a health insurance buyout, which equals anywhere from $2,300 to $2,500. Where does this amount come from? It's contractual. It's part of the bargaining unit's contract. Okay. Now, $10 million, we talked about it going down a nice amount, but it's still a big number. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to just give you a sense of, what's driving this big number, just generally speaking. First of all, employees themselves do contribute to the premiums. And the employees pay, depending on the bargaining unit or the individual, they pay anywhere from 9% to 25% of the numbers down below. That's for active employees. If you are retired, your contribution ranges anywhere from 0 to 50%. So let's look at some of these premiums just to give you an order of magnitude of the cost of health insurance. For active employees, they can take a single or a family policy. Single for both health plans is, just south of 13,000. And for family, you're running close to $30,000 a year. If you are retired and you are not yet of Medicare age, which is 65, you continue to pay the same rates. So you can see that the single and the family premiums are the same as the actives because you are not yet under Medicare. Okay. Your percentage of contribution may vary, but the actual cost of the plan is the same. And then we have the Medicare eligible. So what happens with Medicare eligible, you'll see that the rates drop down. And one might ask, well, why is that? The reason for that is because when you become 65, Medicare becomes your primary plan. We as a district now carry their secondary plan. So because of that, our costs are, the health plan's costs are lower, and consequently the premiums are. There are three categories there. You have single and for retired, and then you have a family 1 and 2. And what that means is that if you have family coverage and you're retired, if one of the spouses is Medicare eligible, but the other isn't, it's family 1. If both are Medicare eligible, it's family 2. And to give you some indication of how many employees are covered under this, the OU Health Plan has 525 participants, and the NYSHA plan has 10. The last thing that's pretty significant with respect to health insurance is, even though we are going to be setting the budget in April and identifying a budget for health insurance, there are 3 events that can occur during the course of the year that can change that number. The first is open enrollment. In November of every year, the district holds an open enrollment, and essentially this is the period of time that an employee can change their coverage, whether it's going from single to family or vice versa. So we can win some and we can lose some here. Hopefully it washes. We also have qualifying events. Under federal law, we must honor qualifying events. You could have a single parent that gives birth to a child. Now they have a family plan. You can have a single individual who gets married. They're picking up a spouse. So as you can see, this can change dramatically. And last but not least, you can have a mid-year retirement. The importance of this is anytime you have a mid-year retirement and the retiree is entitled to health insurance, you are going from 1 plan to 2 plans, because now you have a retiree who's going to be eligible for health insurance that the district continues to pay. And then you have to also hire a new employee to backfill that person, and they will be taking health insurance. So typically speaking, you're going from 1 plan to 2. The last area that we're going to talk about tonight is the contractual, the supplies, and the equipment lines. On an aggregate basis, we're looking at 6.9 million, up from this year about 6.8 and change. It's an increase of only about close to $60,000. We do everything we can to maintain the lines on supplies, contractual, and equipment. I will tell you that every single staff member from every single corner of this district does so much with so little. We hold the line on supplies. There's a rare occasion where we will actually provide somebody with additional supply money. But what this actually encompasses are each of these respective areas here. You have the BOE-COSER agreements. This is the non-special ed. So there are many services and many things that we do through BOCES. This is under that line. Professional services, we have legal fees, we have auditing, and we have security. We have equipment needs. We purchase equipment throughout the year. That could be the technology hardware below. It could also be software. We have maintenance and service contracts, everything from elevator maintenance contracts to water maintenance. We have a host of repairs and maintenance that Walter's budget carries. We also have rubbish removal. You can imagine with about 500,000 square feet of space, we generate a lot of garbage. And then you have instructional things such as textbooks and instructional supplies. Lastly, I just want to remind you, we still have 4 meetings before the board has to adopt on April 22nd. At this point in time, I will open it up for any questions anybody may have.
Harvey?
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Larry.
Oh, thank you. One of the things, I was going back to the fund balance and reserves and the 4.1 million that we have in the budget this current year.
Yes.
Just to remind people, one of the reasons that's as high as it is because of what you had mentioned before, is that the projected state aid reduction, we as a board decided to make that up.
Right.
So that's why it was artificially, if you would, higher this year than it has been in the past.
That is
Just wanted
correct.
to remind people of that.
Louis, you have a question?
Um,
I think Brendan was jumping in.
Yeah, I didn't. I don't have a full visual on everybody, so I didn't see who was there. Yeah, I was just going to ask Harvey. I know that usually your estimates are pretty conservative at this point. Can we expect any increase in state aid from? I know that a lot of this depends on the package that comes out of Washington. If when. Is there any sense on how that may impact our aid contribution over the next month?
Good question. So part of the big stimulus package, the 1.9 trillion that's in front of Congress right now, included in that is $130 billion for school districts. Now, I don't know specifically how much New York's going to get of that, nor do we know how it's going to be divided up. But we're optimistic, and until we know, we don't know. I am hopeful that we will get some more. My concern is that New York State has a tendency to oftentimes supplant state aid and use it to balance the budget for the state as a whole. So we're hopeful that that doesn't occur. But certainly, as we go through each one of these meetings, I will be bringing you up to date on that.
And is there what is the current in your current numbers? Do you have a number that you're just assuming that we would get, and just so we can have a sense of whether we exceed that number in the next few weeks?
So what we have in there is based on what the governor's executive budget says. That executive budget reflects a $6 billion inflow from the federal government, which has not yet been approved. Okay. He has $6 billion in there already in his executive budget, and he was hoping for an additional 15. Okay. The 15 is not factored in anywhere, but the 6 billion is.
Got it. But like you're saying, even if it is 15, that doesn't necessarily mean that a proportional amount goes to schools. He could be backfilling other holes.
Right. He needed the 15 to balance the state budget.
Right. Okay. Got it. Thank you.
Harvey? I think one of the first things I did when I was came to the board was ask you about all these fund balances. It was a concern, just especially now that we're looking like it at the unemployment reserve is practically nil. And looking at tax surgeries and things like that. So I hope, are you going to outline a plan for increasing these?
Yes. So the process for that actually has to wait till the end of the year. The reason being is the only place that we get funds or have funds that we can contribute or increase this is if we have a surplus this year. Okay, so we don't know exactly where we're going to end the year right now, obviously, But typically what happens is that once we end the year and the audit report is done, then I present to the board and I explain to them, this is how much of a surplus we have, and this is my recommendation. The board can allocate it any way that they see fit. And that's that process that takes place, usually somewhere around August, September.
Okay. Also, if this is a rollover, which I find a little confusing, rollover versus zero-based budgeting. So you're using last year, okay. Now, we're entering a time right now where we're looking at oil prices going up, heating prices. Now, last year, if you looked at your bills last year, I would imagine, especially since for the whole year, a lot of our buildings weren't used to their capacities. Are we looking, are we taking that into consideration, I should say, that increases in heating oil and
Yes, to answer your question, there was actually a couple good points you made in there. This budget is a zero-based budget approach. We start with zero. In terms of a rollover, I want you to think in terms of rollover of program and services that we continue. In terms of what those programs and services cost, that's where we start from the ground up, okay?
Mhm.
Now, with regards to utilities, specific to utilities, in terms of oil, we really don't have much oil anymore. The only building that uses oil right now is the district office, so very negligible, okay? Everything else is based on natural gas and obviously electricity for the lights and so forth. For both lighting and natural gas, we are part of a consortium.
okay.
And it consists of, I believe the last time I looked, there was something like 24 different school districts in the region. And we use a consulting firm as a consortium, and they go out and they wait for the market to be just right. And they go
buy
in and
bulk.
they lock us in, okay? So it avoids the swings that we may have or that you may see in the markets. Now, with regards to factoring in the usability or the volume of both kilowatts and cubic feet of gas, that is all taken into account. It's important to also note that even though in these times where you don't have every student in the buildings are still fully open and occupied to some extent every single day. And where we can shut down one area or lower the temperature, we do. But generally speaking, for the most part, most of the buildings still need to be where they are as if they were fully occupied.
And lastly, as a district, do you reach out to see and get a better idea of how many teachers are going to be retiring? Obviously, people, at the higher end of this pay scale versus new hires that would be at the lower end of the pay scale, and the money that saves you. Do you get an idea of that at this time of year? Is that something that you reach out and see? Is the state going to be offering any incentives, anything that you know of?
Right. So there's no incentive right now that's coming out of the state specific to when we typically hear from the teachers. It's usually before or just before the end of March. And the reason for that is contractually, that's a date in their contract
Mhm.
that they have to let us know for certain reasons.
Okay.
So that's why I say we should be hearing, once we hit March, we should be getting some indication of anybody who is going to be retiring.
Okay. The only other question I think I have, and it's just to throw out there, it's got, in the future, it might have something to do with the budget. But since most of the buildings, which is great, run on natural gas, electric as the other expensive part of a budget, any type of power like that, have we ever looked into getting any kind of, maybe not roof-based, but solar panels on any of the sites? and looking at any of the incentives that are offered by the state. Have we investigated that? Are we
We
going
have.
to?
We actually have. It goes back to, I can't remember the exact year, but it's probably about 5 years ago when we actually converted all of our furnaces to natural gas. We did that through the New York Power Authority. It was a program we became part of. They looked at solar and it wasn't feasible back then. Fast forward to today's times, the incentives, they come and go quickly. At the present time, we are being told, the architects and engineers are saying it still is not economically feasible. Now, that's based on a lot of different things. For instance, you may see Warwick has a big solar farm, okay? It's economically feasible for them because they have such a large amount of property that they weren't using that they can implement for this reason. We do not. Our building tops, very limited. We don't have enough athletic field space, let alone, fields for putting solar panels. So the payback is just not there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Harvey. I appreciate your help.
Okay, anyone else have any questions for Harvey before we move on?
Hi, Nancy. Yeah, John here.
Okay.
Harvey, thank you for putting this together and walking us through. I especially like your insights on not only what we're facing, but how we got here. I think actually in terms of my expectations, this is a lot better than I was expecting, to tell you the truth. But here's a question. It has to do with, we always look at budget to budget, but really it comes down to how much you spend in a year. And last year was obviously a very special year. We shut down basically for the last 25% of the year, right? Hence the increase in all those balances that got either assigned to various reserves or was then used to reduce the tax levy. We're 66% through this year. Are we running more traditional in terms of our expenditures? Are we running less? How is COVID affecting our current expenditures versus what we budgeted for?
Sure. So let's just talk about the impact of COVID on the budget. Let's break it down into there's really two key categories. One is what I would call PPE, essentially supplies. Okay, what are we doing here? I'm talking about disinfectant, gloves, masks, wipes, nurses' curtains, barrier curtains, and the plexiglass dividers that we've currently installed throughout the district. Aside from the nurses' curtains, because we put isolation curtains in every nurse's office. Aside from that, we're talking about mass quantities of everything I just mentioned to you. Okay, Walter has a separate room in his buildings and grounds that just has boxes and boxes of this stuff. For those supplies, to date, we've spent about $200,000. Okay. The other part of this is staffing. I can't begin to tell you how many various combinations and permutations we have with respect to both in-person teaching and remote. We have teachers, we have subs, we have TAs, we have teachers covering for teachers, we have subs providing in-class coverage when a teacher is doing it remote. The reality is that all of those staffing needs, we have on an annual basis, we're looking at about $500,000 additional. Okay. So those are the two big pieces that I see. As far as savings to offset that, there's some. There's not as much as many people think. Some of the things that come to light are security. We spend a lot on security, believe it or not, but we're not needing security as much because, for instance, Mondays, the children aren't in, okay? You're saving money there. You're saving some money on transportation because we're not transporting every single day. There is some savings. One of the saving graces to the Cornwall School District this year and any other district that is part of the OU health plan is that the plan has been doing so well that they actually gave a rebate. Okay. We got a rebate equal to 1 month's premium. Okay. So that's about $800,000. That's helping us tremendously this year. Okay. That, you know, that allows us to sleep at night knowing that whatever we have in front of us, we can deal with. So to answer your question, John, yeah, I don't know if we're not 2/3 through the year. It's a school year, or you know, we're just getting past halfway mark in terms of expenses flushing through and so forth. I hope that we end up finishing the year with a surplus much as we have in each past years. I just don't know how much. Okay, there's a lot in front of us. The discussion with Terry's update, you know, are we going to need to do more PPE? Are we going to need, you know, desk barriers? There's too many contingencies out there right now to peg a number.
But all else equal, it seems that we're on budget and maybe slightly better than budget based on some of the windfall gains that came through healthcare.
Right, right.
Great, thanks.
You're welcome.
Nina, I think you were going to ask a question.
Yeah, I'm curious, Harvey. Last year we had gone into fund balance to alleviate some of the taxpayer burden. Can you just talk briefly about how that might affect our ability to close any potential hole this year?
Sure. So when we use, let's talk specifically about this year and what transpired. The budget has in it a $4.1 million assigned fund balance. Now, when we move forward to the next year, the year that we're actually presenting on tonight, if we do not assign the same amount of money, we have a shortfall. Okay. We went from 4.1 to my projected 3.2. So we have to make up that difference through our other revenue. Okay, so we're 900, if another way of putting it, if I use the 4.1 again, that $75,000 surplus would be significantly higher. It'd be 900,000 higher, but it's not sustainable. The district cannot expect a $4.1 million surplus to utilize each year. Okay. Again, the way that we budget on a worst case scenario, but that worst case does not factor in that large of a worst case. Okay. So to your point, historically, you can see here in the past 2 years, we had 2.4 million that we keep allocating. And the reason for that is because I go back to that, you know, we never have a dark cloud over us every year. So we are generating in a tight range, the same amount of surplus each year, and we give it back. Okay. We also try to build up some of our reserves along the way, but we're giving back to the taxpayers so that it lowers and it keeps the tax rate as low as it can be.
Is that offset in some way potentially? I'm just looking on a sources and uses basis here, from the fact that we thought we were going to get 20% less from the state, you know, assumedly if we get to year end, that overage may be a source for fund balance for us, right?
Well, so I just want to go back to that because that's a good point. So as you can see here, we reduced the state aid that we're going to be receiving this year by 1.2 million. Okay. So to your point, since we are going to be receiving that, how does that factor in? It factors in because it will help with the surplus that we have this year. But remember, we still have to fit that nut of 3.2 million. So it's helping us with regards to whittling down and getting to a level that's sustainable moving forward. So it was a good move that the board recognized doing that last year. That was a very good move.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions before we move on? Okay, Harvey, thank you so much. This was
Thank you.
outstanding as usual. Thank you. Okay, so now we move on to closing comments from the board. Josh and Giselle, are you still with us?
I am Giselle. Her connection got cut out because of the snow. She said so her Wi-Fi went out, but she did send me this as a final comment. She said, "I'm very grateful that Josh and I are the student representatives in these very difficult times and are able to share the student perspective. Thank you so much for allowing us to have a voice. Also, even though these times are unprecedented, it's clear to me that the board is doing the very best they can for their students, which I'm very grateful for as well. Finally, I'm so sorry that I wasn't able to attend the entire meeting because of my Wi-Fi problems. I wish I was able to be there for the entire meeting and of course see more of Mrs. Quinn's cat walk in front of the camera." That is Giselle's comment. I have a few things just as final thoughts. Just as a student, I was thinking about the plexiglass. We have classes where we're not sitting at a desk solely, physical education classes, orchestra classes, chorus, technology, and more, where, you know, where we don't have like a desk to put plexiglass on. So just wanted to throw that out there as well. Something I've been looking forward to for over a year now was the elimination of class rank, or the change to the Latin tier system. I wanted to thank all of you for approving that at our last meeting, because we've had ongoing talks I've had ongoing talks, Giselle and I, with Mr. DeBold about that. We really feel confident that's going to bring a better competition and a more stronger competition, self-competition to our high school. Students won't be competing against each other, they'll be competing against themselves. I think it's really just going to foster a much healthier academic environment in that range. But then students are also going to be able to go and take those classes that they think will be challenging and not have to worry about dropping off in class ranking comparison with their fellow students. So thank you again for that. I'm very pleased to see that rolled out, and I'm excited to see its implementation in the future. I was surprised my mom didn't tell me she put in a public comment. So yes, I just wanted to add to that public comment. I am one of her children, obviously, who has been in the strings program since 4th grade. Can completely advocate for adding another teacher as a high school student. It is amazing to have access to Mr. Franza at any time of the day, as it would be for any student to have access to any teacher. So, advocating for the additional string teacher is definitely supported on my end and on the student end. And finally, I just wanted to comment on how positive the in-person activities has been for our high school and for our district students. We're in the winter, so our sports are mostly outside, which, we're dealing with. We're looking towards spring. It's almost here. But it's really been so good for our students. Like the sports, everyone has something to look forward to. Everyone has something to, kind of unify under again, which is really, really positive and has been lacking for a long time, as you all know. And like just today, I had my drama club audition for the new musical. Went well, but it was virtual. We're looking forward though to an in-person rehearsal again. It's the little things like that where it really makes a difference in students' every day-to-day lives. So I just wanted to thank everybody for all the work they've been doing on that, and just say just how truly positive that's been for our student body. So that's it for me. I hope you all have a great night, and thank you so much.
Thank you, Josh. Nina, we're going to now go to you. We'll start with you for the board.
Okay. Thank you, Josh and Giselle. It's always rewarding to hear what's going on at the schools. Really interesting thing there. I think just rewarding to hear about Black History Month and Chinese New Year being celebrated, and paying homage to so much good stuff that's happening. I was really delighted to hear about some of the civility efforts and that sort of thing with making sure you say hello to a number of people. Congratulations to Isabel and Catherine. I think that's such an amazing distinction for them. And, you know, we're so proud that they're part of our district in terms of how well they have done. To the drama club, I think, you know, Josh, I hope you get your part. I think it's great to hear that they're going to be able to do something outdoors on that scale, and to our sports teams in resuming what they've done. Thank you, Harvey, for the budget presentation. As always, it was very comprehensive and a lot of detail. And I think finally, you know, we spent the bulk of our meeting talking about getting the kids back into school 5 days a week, and what the rules are and what the requirements are. And, you know, I think that is, you know, our goal. I think, you know, there's some concern about, you know, how invested the board is in that, or how invested the district is in that. But I think getting back to the most normal situation that we can get to, understanding what the rules are and understanding that we have to keep everybody safe is all part of our highest and best goals. And we are striving for that as a board and as an administration. I think I can, that's my observation. So I would hope that, you know, people feel comfortable in the fact that, you know, we're just not a check the box sort of group here. And I would thank my fellow board members for all of their research and thoughtful ideas and suggestions. And I guess I would also like to reaffirm what we talked about earlier, which is I think we should do a new survey and really, you know, get a sense from people of where they want their kids to be right now, and, you know, potentially what we can do with that data.
Okay, thank you, Nina. Margaret?
Yeah, again, another great board meeting. It's only 9 o'clock. Sometimes it feels like it goes a whole lot longer, but we covered so many great things, including the budget and where we are in that process. But I was wondering, or I was thinking about ways that, you know, everybody obviously wants to advocate for, you know, more of a determined information from the CDC and the state and how that's going to connect. And I'm wondering whether we could create some kind of form letter or something that could easily then be signed and then emailed to the state. So we get that voter, you know, it's one thing to say, okay, everybody just contact your representative, but I wonder whether we could come up with a template that would kind of cover the bullet points, you know, that we are all voters and we have an influence, and we really want the state to align with the CDC guidelines, that kind of thing. So I wonder if that might be something that we could do that then could be sent out to everyone in the district, that they could, if they want, they could sign their name to it and ship it right away, so they don't have to take the time to do it themselves. I'm definitely up for a polling the parents to see where they are. I mean, maybe with the space limitations that we have, and we have enough of a break between families that want to be in person more frequently and those that are more hesitant, you know, that maybe turns out there's a nice connection now, and we might be able to do more with our space limitations. I'm wondering also whether there's some way for multiple boards to maybe see if we can get a Zoom call with Dr. Gelman, you know, at some point, to maybe say, so we can lobby her as well, and just kind of say, you know, not just Cornwall, but the entire Hudson Valley, you know, really would appreciate you considering moving alongside with the CDC guidelines, you know, and can you tell us maybe what's keeping you from doing that, you know, something like that, that we can just kind of go from the theory to then maybe bringing in a whole bunch of different school boards, get unified and start talking to the county. I love the fact that, I mean, it's so great to see, on a separate note, the educational creativity that's happening in the school district from, you know, from not just teachers, creating these amazing opportunities for the kids. But I mean, just on every level, you hear about it all the time. And it's such a great thing to see that despite this ridiculous time and COVID, that I know everybody's COVID weary and we're all ready for it to be over and the like, but that's not stopping anybody. You know, everybody's continuing to push through. And I think that resilience really speaks to the district. I was just having a conversation with one of my daughter's friends, and my daughter said this the other day as well, that she's a junior in college at this point, and that the education that she received in Cornwall, the high levels of instruction and the high expectations, that she felt like she, almost learned more structurally in Cornwall than kind of the theory that's happening, on the college level. So I want to really applaud everybody who works together to make sure that our kids, continue to have these high standards, and that everybody is really reaching toward those standards, because that really helps prepare the students for going forward, whether they decide to go to college or go, another route. And that's pretty much all I have to say. I'm done blabbering for the night. Thank you very much for listening. And the cat says hi too.
Thanks, Margaret. John, we'll move on to you.
Thanks, Nancy. And thank you, Margaret and Nina, for your comments. I agree 100%. Matt's not here, so he's given me permission again to use his term ditto on everything that's been said. Josh, please relay to Giselle. I really appreciated her last commentary that you read. Awesome, right to the point. And thank you for sharing your perspective, not only about the strings and orchestra and Kevin Franca, but also, how it is for you in school and the like. I understand that you guys are very high achievers, and so the positivity that comes from both of you is refreshing, actually, and it kind of is a bit of motivating. It inspires me, but I worry about the kids that aren't in your position, and I wonder, as we move to this new hybrid model that includes remote instruction daily, that maybe a wellness check of the student population, especially at the high school, might somehow be incorporated into that new schedule on Mondays somehow. And I just throw that out there because mental health obviously is very important. It's a big struggle for everybody, especially our young people. And if we're not doing something like that in a group setting, and I would request that we look into it to see how we can cover the base on that. I think academically we're doing great. I think in terms of athletics and now the arts, we're covering those three traditional strong parts of the Cornwall experience. But I really wonder about on the mental health side, if there's more that we could be doing as a preventative in terms of wellness. So I just throw that out there. Harvey, thank you for your budget, your brief. You're the numbers guy and you make the numbers very easy to understand. Thank you for that. Very complex environment. I know there's a lot of balls in the air, and I walk away with a little bit more confidence as I hear you the last two times talk about what we're facing. So thank you for not only your approach and your demeanor, but also your tireless efforts in getting these numbers right. Terry, finally to you, thank you and your staff and the teachers. The CDC guidelines, I think, is a game changer for us. It's incumbent on the state to get in line with what CDC has established. All manner of communication, all avenues of approach, we shouldn't stop. I like Margaret's idea, especially about writing. How that's done, whether it's individually or collective in a big box and sent to somebody's office, I'd be all for it. But Terry, thank you for your leadership, and things are getting better. And hopefully the CDC, as I said, with this game-changing pronouncement, will make it even better than what we have planned come March 1st. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Brendan?
Thanks, Nancy. So first of all, I just want to reiterate everything that has been said so far. Josh, Giselle, always great to have you, and particularly having the firsthand accounts of just how things are in the trenches, so to speak. And it's always great to see how that to get your commentary. Yeah, I think to echo what everybody's saying on the school reopening, and maybe just to put a little bit of a different form on it. So I definitely see this as being on two different tracks. There's the advocacy, and then there's preparing if the advocacy doesn't work. Because one thing I think we have to understand and realize, I've certainly gotten to this point, is that a lot of there is conflicting guidance that comes out of the Department of Health, or at least in their the Orange County Department of Health, at least in their communication, right? Maybe their underlying guidance hasn't changed, but I've had the experience of hearing something on the phone and then seeing something different on Facebook. We have the same experience with the State Department of Health. This has made me trust less in the idea that we need to wait for the guidance to change, because I just have less faith that this partner is reliable. So that's not to say that we should give up hope in the state health department changing its guidance, but I think again we have to go on two tracks. So on the guidance part, or on the advocacy part, I love that idea by Margaret. I think that we can totally do that. I know I usually nominate myself for things, but I will nominate myself this week. I'll send something out internally as a board. We can talk about it and maybe get something up, obviously with Terry's input as well, just to at least as a starting point, to give people something. I think there was a lot of great energy on the call tonight, and from the community, it seemed like there were people that really wanted to help. And I think that that's something that we should try to corral as much as we can. I think our arguments can be very clear. The state needs to follow CDC. There are some science-based arguments. The one thing I have been frustrated with the state health department has been the fact that it has not taken in new information since August. It came out with its guidelines in August, and we had a completely different understanding of COVID back then. Since then, we've learned about the fact that it's 50% less likely for kids to contract and spread it. We've learned that they actually don't emit as much virus particles as adults do. The 6 feet is based, I didn't know that about tuberculosis, John, but I know that the 6 feet is also based on what adults emit, right? Kids don't emit that way, nor do they receive to the same degree. All of this has come since August, and they haven't updated it. And people say follow the science, which I completely agree with. But part of scientific approach is to take in new information as it comes in. When you base your judgments on old arguments, that's more bordering on dogma than science. So I think these are some of the things that we need to approach our state health department with. But again, we also have to prepare that, we can't rely just on that. So I want to reinforce my support for not only the poll, getting what people's current take is, but also I think that, the elementary school kids are, they're probably the ones that could most, I don't want to say benefit, but it's probably the easiest rollout at the elementary schools for this kind of, if we explore this kind of plexiglass solution, because of the fact that they don't switch classes. But I also think that the need is greatest there, because they're the ones that whose schooling does not translate as well to a remote virtual setting, not as well as the upper classes. So in a time where we've been able to give more for the upper grades, which I think is fantastic. I think that the younger grades need it too. So I'll be very interested to see what the poll turns out. But again, thank you to everybody, on my fellow board members, but also Terry, Megan, Harvey. I know this is like every month it's like a new set of, it's a new reality, whether it's because of guidelines or a new public sentiment, let's say. So we appreciate you, rolling with it. And I think that tonight we did a good job collectively of moving some things forward. So looking forward to see where that goes.
Thanks, Brendan. Teresa?
Thank you very much, Harvey, for starting this presentation tonight and bringing this information. It was really done clearly, and I appreciate it. I'm glad we're looking at those areas of the reserves, because in the long run, it's what'll keep the school district solvent, and will also keep a reasonable tax increase over a reasonable amount of time, rather than having 1 year where something might just go wrong and you have to make it up in spades. So thank you for that. It was a good discussion tonight. I think parents are very, very frustrated, and I can, we're all frustrated. Administration is frustrated. I believe in the science, but I also know when the science and how it's interpreted continually changes, it's very confusing. And I think most parents, everyone I speak to, myself included, it gets to the point where you don't know exactly what to believe. I do think, though, that people, after tonight, it would be helpful if within this week, Terry and Nancy could follow up with letting us know when a new poll would be going out, or a new questionnaire, I should say. And this way that we have a time frame, because I think parents want to know that after this meeting, we're going to be following through on some of these things. So a questionnaire. And, I agree. I think children in the elementary levels, it's something, each grade level is to approach a little differently. And I really do think that there may be things. I don't know what that was. But I think if we look at if we could also find out about cost on the elementary level, because as Josh said, I don't think it would work at the high school level or even the middle school. But if we could look at the elementary level cost factor, cost it out for the plexiglass, and to see if that could work in those grades, and to find out how parents feel about things like that currently. So thank you, everybody. And thank you to the cabinet and to Terry as well.
Thanks, Teresa. Larry?
As always, Josh and Giselle, your reports and opinions are more than appreciated. It's nice to hear about sports again, and I'm looking forward to the drama presentation. There's a whole piece of the presentations that's been lacking, and kind of missed that. Another note, perhaps some kind of a task force could help in disseminating accurate information. I think that's one of the problems we've got going on now. If we could get a bunch of people together to research accurate information. Although what Brendan had mentioned, depending on, you get what you think is accurate information, and then find out that it's oh no, it's wrong, go to this one, instead of them taking down the inaccurate information. I agree with a poll. Nothing more to say on that. Of course, thanks to Harvey for his leadership in the budget. It's appreciated, and you do make it understandable. Thank you. Terry, thanks for attempting to clear up mud. I'm not sure it happened, but we sure took a stab at it tonight. So thank you. One last thing, the Orange County Health Commissioner threw districts under the bus by saying we should look at how other districts did it and managed to open up. What she didn't say is that some of the smaller districts have very declining enrollment and had a lot of space. There's at least one district I know of that had a closed building because of declining enrollment and opened a new building, not a new building, and opened a building. and had been experiencing declining enrollment in their other buildings. So it's not fair to say, look at other districts, see how they did it, when we don't have the same available space that other districts had. And I think that's just, it was an unfair and self-serving comment that she made on Facebook. My opinion. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Larry. Lewis?
Thank you, Nancy. So I'll open with the concept of that, the poll. I think it's critical that we as the board and the district hear from people. What I think is more critical, or as critical, is we disseminate or know the facts of what we're asking. I would hate to put a poll out asking about how a person or family felt about their child learning behind plexiglass, only to find out still can't do it. So that poll is moot. So I think I'm all for polling the public. I'm all for, you can't poll the public every month to see which way we're going to run our district, left or right, month by month. But as this is a dynamic situation, I don't think it's unwarranted. But I want to be cautious. I would just say that make sure asking we can achieve. No sense in asking everybody if it can't happen. So I would caution on that realm. I do have in my notes tonight that I did write down that I do believe we should reach out to other board presidents and other boards, our neighboring boards, our neighboring districts, and perhaps they go one level away and go to their neighboring districts. Next thing you know, we have 24 boards all communicating to one degree or another, and perhaps that will ring the bell of the politicians, and that will ring the bell of the state or CDC or Orange County, and perhaps pressure them for additional clarity. Ironically enough, Brendan, I was going to ask if you would, put a doc together or do some type of organizational thing that you typically, zone in to do. So thanks for jumping in on that. Appreciate that. Josh and Giselle, thank you as always for your reports. I always appreciate your thoughts and insights into the school. The reports are wonderful, but to hear you guys actually comment on what that heartbeat is and what that real feel is, I truly believe it's biased and it does represent the greater group. So I do thank you for that. Harvey, as always, thank you for your detailed presentations. You never let us down with the level of detail you go down to. So thank you. I know there's more to come. I appreciate that, and I'm looking forward to those shows coming in the spring. I wish you the best of luck in the part you're looking for. I'm looking forward to that spelling bee. I think it's going to be great concept. So thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Lewis. I'd like to thank you to our parents for their insight and sharing of thoughts. Thank you to my board and to our administrative team. Harvey, an excellent next step as we navigate our finances for the next school year. And Giselle and Josh, as always, just a joy to have you with us, and so wonderful to hear all the great things going on in all the schools. That was certainly a highlight for me. For me personally, the last couple of weeks have been harder for whatever reason. Maybe the excessive snow, because I can tell you the 30 inches did me in. Maybe the continuation of limited in-person contact, and we all have our stories. Although I don't have children in school, my grandchildren always provide a view from their perspective. My almost 8-year-old second grader shared with my daughter last week how she broke into tears and said how hard everything is and how sick of all it is she is, and how she just wants to hug everyone and be near people and she can't, and this is the worst, and it makes her so sad. She's actually fine. I don't want anybody to think she's not, but that was just like a moment she had. She was overtired and she had her moment. Her district, which is a large one, it's a city district on Long Island, is trying to do 5 days. And that would be a switch from 2 at their lower levels, but they have the space to do it and they're hoping it would work, but they're not 100% sure. When she heard that 5 days was going to happen, she squealed with happiness and danced around. If these past 2 weeks I have offended anyone with some of my comments, I have realized that voicing my opinion the way I had is not always the best thing. So having crossed that bridge, I am trying to be more thoughtful and focus on what I can do. That being said, I truly have faith in this district and that we will do what we can with what we have and what we can do. Limitations imposed that are out of our control are just that. We will get through this hopefully sooner than later. And I know everyone involved has only the best for all of our children in Cornwall, whether our kindergartners or our seniors and all in between. And as president of this board, I do plan on, and I thank a lot of you for planting seeds in my head tonight. I took a million notes for ideas, but I plan on reaching out as the board president to the New York State School Boards Association, certainly Orange County School Boards Association, and our local representatives to see what they can do to possibly move the state to follow the CDC requirements, because we have to have a million voices in a million different ways right now. So I thank you all for all of your efforts tonight. And on that note, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So move.
And a
Second, second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Hi.
Opposed? Nobody's opposed. Okay, that's good.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you all. Have a wonderful rest of the evening, and it's gonna get warm and this stuff's gonna melt.
Take care, everyone. Be safe.
Someday.